Let me catch people up to speed again, John, if you'll excuse me for another minute, and thanks for coming on short notice. Keith Ford sustained a broken leg that kept him out of most of Oklahoma's season this past season. He broke it in the win over Tennessee.
Yeah.
And nearly 5 months later now, Ford was indefinitely suspended. They called it academic and team rules violations. Here is the note for all of our listeners. Here's the note that was sent out to the local media from Keith and Mary Ford, the parents of Keith Ford. It reads the following. Although we respect the decision of Coach Stoops to suspend our son from the football team, the actions that prompted this decision were uncharacteristic of our son's behavior. We believe Keith never recovered completely, physically and or mentally, from the injury that occurred in the Tennessee game. After speaking with several medical professionals, we found that this is not uncommon among athletes after suffering extensive injury. Therefore, we brought this to the attention of Coach Stoops and the OU staff, and they are actively engaged in helping Keith. When Coach Stoops told us, "I will never shut a kid out," he solidified our complete trust and confidence in the OU program. We are praying for the return of Keith Ford, number 21. What is going on, John?
Well, just from checking around, it sounds like Keith Ford is fighting depression. The suspension had nothing to do with drugs, nothing illegal went on. It from what I'm hearing, he just quit going to workouts and quit going to class, which is what led to the suspension. I'm no psychologist, but that kind of sounds like what he's fighting. So that's kind of where it's all at.
Man, that is a bummer. That is a bummer. Why do you think? And I'm kind of asking you to be speculative here, and so feel free to just turn down the question altogether. But why was this either not discussed by Stoops? Maybe I have a good answer to that. Maybe Stoops doesn't feel comfortable doing it. And B, why do you think it came out? Why do you think the parents felt it necessary to explain this?
Well, I think in the parents' case is they don't want people out there thinking that our kid flunked a drug test or our kid's out on campus corner knocking people out or anything like that. This is, he didn't do anything, Keith Ford hadn't done anything illegal or anything like that. I have, run across coaches that, they definitely, when people start running wild with why a kid is suspended or something like that, they may not be able to say. And I think in OU's case, if it is depression, it kind of falls under the HERPA law. They can't really say what it is. So, but getting it out there is the reason why certainly helps Keith Ford's case.
If it is depression and that's what he's dealing with, why does Bob Stoops come out and say yesterday that he has been suspended from the team? Is this something he just found out about?
It can be a deal as simple as if he's not going to class that he's passed the limit on the amount of once you skip X amount of classes with unexcused absences, they have to sit you. It could be as simple as that. It could be that they just made the decision on Monday with what they were going to do. I don't 100% know. Stoops didn't talk to us yesterday, so. I don't know why on that, but typically, I've covered the guy long enough. If you're looking for details on the suspension, you're not going to get it from him.
Yeah, John Shinn with us here on the Little Caesars Hot and Ready Hotline on 107.7 The Franchise. All right, what really struck you in terms of what Lincoln Riley had to say yesterday?
He believes they are good enough at quarterback going into next year. I think even he kind of said it in code, but they clearly need to get better at wide receiver, and I think that is the vocal point of that offense for this spring is getting all those guys ready to play at the speed and I guess the amount of plays that he's looking for them to play next year. And it'll be interesting to me, a big part about that offense and a big part about Lincoln Riley's first year is can you run that offense if you only have 4 or 5 receivers that you really like? Another deal, just from talking to him and some other people, a guy like Mark Andrews, who's going to be a tight end, basically, they really like him. So any thoughts that these guys are going to be out there in a bunch of 4 and 5 receiver sets all next year, I think that's probably not going to happen. I mean, this sounds like it. They may run up tempo, but they are going to look, at least formation-wise, a lot more like a pro-style offense next year. I think that's kind of what I'm hearing, at least early.
So in the priority of worrisome position units for Lincoln Riley, it seems to you that wide receiver far exceeds quarterback.
From listening to him, I think that's very much the case. And as bad as OU looked at that spot at the end of last year, all people need to remember is the way that offense looked before Sterling Shepard got hurt and after it. They were moving the ball and scoring points on everybody when Sterling Shepard was out there. And as soon as he got hurt, that's when that ability to throw the ball really came to a halt. Now, they really like D.D. Westbrook, but like I say, if you only have about 4 receivers that you feel comfortable with, it's awful hard to get out there and try to run 100 plays a game. It really is. I mean, you think about with those wide receivers, that means you're running a 30 to 40-yard sprint every 25 to 30 seconds. Just, think about that for a second. If you're serious about it, you think, you should be running a high up-tempo offense. Think about the strain of that.
John Shinn with us on 107.7 The Franchise. I was playing this card yesterday with people that, we talk a lot about how, the running back stable has, it was deep, it was deep. And still, you still got P. Ryan, you got, Ross, and you, I guess, have Mixon as well. Is it the best in Norman since the current regime arrived?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can argue when they had Adrian Peterson for those 3 years, that was as good as it gets, but they've never been this deep. You'd have to go all the way back to the Switzer era to be this deep at running back. And oddly enough, in the Switzer era, you could play 6 running backs without much worry about it. In this offense, it's a little bit harder to get all those guys on the field, but they've never been close to this deep at running back. Since, I mean, you think about a couple of years ago, guys get hurt, you might see a walk-on back there. You remember Dominique Whaley. That's not the case anymore. I mean, this is as deep as it's been under Stoops. It's not even close.
Is it also the thinnest they've been at wide receiver since the Switzer era?
It's definitely the thinnest they've been since they went to an up-tempo offense, and realistically, you need a minimum of 6 quality guys to run that style of offense, I think.
Last year we saw Blake Bell, and by the way, John Shinn with us here on 107.7 The Franchise, our OU insider. We saw Blake Bell move to tight end, and they tried to use that position a little bit more. Are they even going to use a tight end this year? Is there a guy that can step in and do what Bell did? Or are they going to try to utilize that position maybe even more than they did last year?
I was going to write about this later this week. Some interesting things that Lincoln Riley said. He's a lot like Kevin Wilson. And Kevin Wilson saw the tight end spot as a mismatch spot. A guy, can your tight end be a guy that forces a defense, that forces a package from the defense? And he kind of talked about Mark Andrews in that way. Can he be a guy that, if he's on the field, does that mean they come out with, say, 3 linebackers and 4 defensive backs? Okay, can I now spread him out and take advantage of that? Or is, he a guy that can just play with his hand on the ground next to a tackle? OU sees Andrews as a guy they can move around. Jermaine Gresham, when that offense was at its absolute best, it was because mainly Gresham, but in some ways, in a lot of ways, DeMarco Murray, and they feel like they have that kind of talent at running back. Those guys were mismatched nightmares in that if you came out with too many defensive backs, they could become a big power offense. If you came out with too many linebackers, they could spread you out and become a spread offense. That's what they're looking for Mark Andrews to be. Definitely not saying he's Jermaine Gresham, but if you have that kind of tight end and you have it in the up-tempo offense, you can really toy with the defense with that.
Last one I got for you. John Shinn with us on 107.7 The Franchise. I played this little hypothetical game with Todd last week and want to get your thought on it. Trevor Knight blows everyone away this spring. Again, hypothetical here. Trevor Knight blows everyone away this spring. Can Bob Stoops pull the trigger and start him?
I think he can, but you really risk. The Akron game is one thing, but when they go to Knoxville that second week of the season, and if you've gone with Trevor Knight as your quarterback, and he looks like he did the second, or he looks like he did probably post September, post that TCU loss, I think there's no coming back from that.
Boy, that would be tough, John. Woo! I mean, when you just went through a whole staff change and everything else, then you're going to go ahead and trot out the same quarterback that took you to 8-5. Oh my goodness!
Now, I'd say you're taking a bigger risk with the fan base,
right?
If Trevor Knight's still your starting. Now, if he earns the job, he earns the job. I mean. But that's one of those deals of, I'll say this, Trevor Knight better have him one. Fans only get to see one deal between the start of the season. They get to see that spring game here in a couple of weeks. And if Trevor Knight better have him one whale of the spring game for fans to see in order for them not to take him still being the starter with a huge grain of salt.
You give it a chance of happening far more than I do. I mean, and again, this is a wild hypothetical that we're already throwing out there, but even in that hypothetical, I told Todd 0%. There is 0% chance that guy is out there to start the season. But
I'm not going to say 0%.
Say it, Shinn.
Well, I'm not going to say 0% because there could be a bus crash where he wasn't on it or something.
Well,
like that.
Anything short of that. Let's go point one.
I don't think there's much of a chance he's going to beat Baker Mayfield out for that job.
Yeah,
so
10-4. All right, buddy. Thanks for coming on short notice. Very grateful.
No problem.
All right, buddy. See ya.
Talk to you
later. How dare you?
That was my bad. Sorry,
John Shinn,
I cut
everybody,
him off.
on 107.7 The Franchise.